very much, and thank you all for staying back, the last graveyard shift of the day. I know everyone's all excited to get out and probably drink a few cold refreshments, but certainly I think the other way around of looking at it is you save the best till last. Okay? So we're the only vanadium guys here at this conference that we're solely a vanadium company. And Currie Rose is quite an old company. It's been on the stock exchange for many, many years, back to the 70s. It's had many different iterations in its life, but I think this is the one that's going to turn the corner and make it into a real big potential mining house. So what we've got is a project in central Queensland. It comes to us via a couple of ASX companies that are quite big. Some of you may have heard of Liontown Resources and Chalice Mining. Chalice Mining is well known to the Red Cloud people, so I'm sure some of you have heard of them. And what we've done is we've consolidated two projects into one, and with that we're looking at being in the Queensland Vanadium Hub. And unlike most of the vanadium stories around, this is a sedimentary-based vanadium rather than one that's with iron and titanium. So it has some advantages over all the others. That's the statement, of course. So here we are, and I'll grab the pointer. So as I said, we're in the vanadium space, critical minerals, and I think it's fair to say it's mostly what I would call the forgotten critical mineral. It often is talked about, but no one seems to explain anything about it, and it's probably one of the most underrated of all the battery metals, but could in fact have one of the greatest impacts when you start thinking through what it can do. So we've recently improved our resource, and I'll go into a lot more detail on that as we go through the presentation, but we've gone from 84 million tonnes of 0.32% vanadium pentoxide to up to nearly 200 million tonnes, and that was purely by re-looking at the existing resources and adding in some additional holes that hadn't been included before, and I'll go into a lot more detail on that as we get further in the project. And of course, management's always one of the key things when you look at being a more mature company. So people on our team have been involved in juniors through seniors and into mining. So myself, I've actually run a copper mine in the Democratic Republic of Congo for my sins. So and I'm a geologist, so I've actually been right through the process from zero to hero. So we're not surprised when we know that things take a lot longer than they usually do. Again, the acquisition recently closed with Liontown and Chalice. They individually are 7% shareholders of the company now. We recently also completed a capital raising. We raised $2.4 million, which has given us a springboard into our work for next 12 months at least. And both of those companies have a royalty on their respective areas of 2%, which we can buy back 50% of that as well. So it's actually a really good deal for us. In essence, it cost us, the values that were provided by the exchange was about $1.2 million. Vanadium markets, I'm sure you all realise that most of the vanadium currently is used in steel, but the real area that we think is going to change everything with vanadium is the battery space. Why is that? Mainly because it's scalable, it's safe, it has a rapid release of large amounts of energy, which means that if, for example, you're on a mine site and you need to kickstart your ball mill, there's enough energy in this to be able to do that, when most of the other batteries don't seem to be able to do that too well. Safe, it's not flammable, and it's also part of this electrolyte and recyclable part. Lasts longer, and of course it's more cost effective than the lithium-based storage, and it fits a different niche. I think that's what you really need to understand. This is perfect in the case where, for example, a lot of utilities around the world are cutting off smaller parts of their national grids because they're getting less and less revenue for their power because people are changing to solar and things like that. And what happens then is the maintenance of the grid becomes harder. So then what they're doing, particularly in Australia right now, they're all cutting off things that don't make money, and they're putting in small power packs for regional areas. You know, a town of maybe 25,000 people could easily have one of these redox flow batteries and solar panels, and all of a sudden they're off the grid, and they don't need to be on the grid any longer. So that becomes a more cost-effective way of doing things. Supply, well, supply is really one of the big issues here as well. There are a number of big vanadium batteries being built around the world right now. There's one in China that's a staged approach. It will be an 800 megawatt hours plant, which is quite large. And the problem is not so much that the technology's there, it's the fact that the electrolyte required for all the batteries isn't there. And at the moment, most of the supply is being taken up by the steel industry. So that's where the big demand is, when people realise that there's an opportunity to put in redox flow batteries in these smaller communities and mine sites and anywhere where it's a little bit remote. That's what it looks like, except right now there isn't as many trees. They're a little bit burnt off, and it's cattle country. So we live in an area where the grass is high, the cows are fat, and at times we'll be able to get the benefit of the area as well. And all-round access. This is really important. It's one of those places where we're on a main road here between Townsville and Mount Isa. Mount Isa being one of the big premier mining centres in Australia. Railway line runs from Mount Isa right through to Townsville. It's underutilised. There's plenty of time and space to get rail cars on the track. There's a tarmac road all the way through. We've got, in fact, our project main ore body sits about here. That has a tarmac road to that as well. It's a 30-kilometre road. So we've been blessed with a whole bunch of infrastructure, which is really one of the main costs of doing things, is having all of that in place right from the start. Got quite a big land package, over 1,200 square kilometres. And we've also got, because of Mount Isa and because of all the mining in Cloncurrie and Currie, Cloncurrie there, there's a lot of mining people, there's a lot of exploration people, so we're in a great place to be able to get people to do it. And as you all know right now, it's really hard to get people. It's probably the hardest resource to find around the world right now is people with experience. And the port also has capacity as well. So again, the infrastructure is looking really good for us. From an overview, regionally, all the green you can see here is the sedimentary unit called the Tullibek Formation, which hosts all the vanadium. And not only is vanadium in there, there's also some moly, there's also some zinc, there's probably about 12% alumina in there as well, which is mainly as a clay, and there's also about 30% silica. We think that we'll be able to liberate the silica and the alumina through a wash plant, and initially we're looking at having a project which starts off to deliver a concentrate before we actually step into producing a higher grade material through leaching. We've got all the tenements you can see here. Our neighbour here has quite a big resource. They've got two very large resources, over 1 billion tonnes of the same material as what we've got. And right here you can see our red patch joins onto the orange patch. So effectively we've got half of their ore body. Well, they've got half of our ore body, let's put it that way. And the town that we can service ourselves from down here at Richmond, it's all easy access, and so everything's looking in shape. So right at this point in time, where are we at in terms of the next steps? Well, right at the moment, because we only closed the transaction in August, we're currently completing the change and handover of tenure, which is a sort of a 2 or 3 month process in Queensland. And we're also writing to all the landowners. These are actually pastoral leases, so they're not wholly owned ground, and so they are leased for 99 years. But we have to have access agreements with them in order to do drilling or anything else, bulk sampling. And because we've increased our resource now up to about 200 million tonnes, we ask ourselves, how much do you need? How much do you need before you have to keep drilling holes and finding more? Well, the drilling here is quite amazing, really. So this is our resource. None of these holes are deeper than 35 metres. 35 metres, so from surface, we've got this ore body, and all these holes are about 500 metres apart. There's 60 drill holes here that fill out this resource. The other company's resource basically, oh, guess what? That blue line doesn't mean it doesn't change. It's the same piece of ore body going through the other side of the blue line. We know what they've been doing. They've been doing feasibility work, and of course they've been doing lots of metallurgical studies. We're privy to getting some of that which is in the public domain, but certainly we need to do our own. And that's what we're in the process of doing. So our preliminary met work says, well, it's shallow from surface. We've got to stockpile the first metre for rehabilitation. It's soft, it's friable, it's a sediment. It's not full of all sorts of hard rock at all. Low strip ratio, suitable for pre-concentration. So we'll take that 0.3334% and turn it into about 1.6 to 1.7%, which is a concentrate that we can ship. And with the shipping available, that means that we're able to look at doing things relatively quickly. We don't have to worry about infrastructure, in other words. Probably have to build a railway siding, that's it. So potential for expansion, we've probably pretty close to, there's probably a little bit more we can go to the north here, but really this is a pocket which we think is probably, that's it. Given that there's another sort of 400 million tonnes on the other side of this blue line, that's a fairly large resource, but we've got tenure. So I'll just, how do I go back one? Is that one? Yeah, so we've got tenure coming, you can see where all the green is? Well, we've got green covered everywhere, and I've wandered around out there, got my boots dirty and had a look. Well, I've got to tell you that there isn't a great deal of outcrop, there's just lots of grass and dirt. But I know from the geophysical surveys that really everywhere that someone's drilled along this trend, they've found the right material within the first 4 or 5 metres. And it's about 10 metres thick. So pretty easy to do your sums very quickly, and you'll find that there's great opportunities. And where do those opportunities come? Well, we've got moly comes for free because the vanadium will pay for that. The zinc will come for free, and neither of those are penalties, they're both credits. And the other things, as I said, we talked about, there's potential for some aluminium to be taken out as for potentially high purity alumina, and we'll stockpile that, we'll do that test work. So coming up in the next few months, after we get all of our permits in place, we're going to do diamond drilling in here. Why diamond drilling? I want to do PQ size, I want to collect a lot of sample, I want to do lots of things with that PQ. I'm going to infill the resource, so we've got 61 million tonnes in the in the indicated status, and that's enough to do a feasibility study on. But what I want to do now is start thinking ahead. With the diamond drilling, that will give us met work material, that'll give us geotechnical information for open pit mining, that'll also give us more clarity on whether there's high-grade pockets within the ore body that we can look to exploit sooner rather than later, because obviously you don't start a pit this big to start with, you're going to start in a smaller area when you've got so many tonnes. So that's all the things I'm starting to think about at the moment, and the diamond drilling planned would most likely be March next year, and that's because there'll be a rainy season for a little while, and they call colloquially, local term for this is bottomless country, and if you drive around it when it's wet, well, you can move your feet around and not touch anything because it's just goo. So you don't want to take a drill rig in there. These are the other targets, all close by. So this area was drilled by the Chalice guys, and whilst this is a radiometric image, it's not necessarily for uranium. We don't have any uranium of any value in this deposit, but what we do has an indicator. So we can use that, and when we've looked at the entire area and see what the radiometrics are showing, all those areas in green just look like this. And all of these holes here are reported to have intercepts sort of 5 metres at 0.42, which is above our average. So it actually looks like it'll be a similar sort of resource to what we'd have to the south. And then just a bit further to the south of that one, Runnymede, this one we'll have to do a bit more work on because the drill spacing's not quite amenable to making into a resource. So they're the two most advanced ones, and we'll be able to do some work on those shortly. Okay, in addition to all those other good things, we've got government support. So the Queensland government has decided to build a facility in Townsville which will treat all of the rocks and everything we want to do on a pilot stage. So it's a common user facility that's currently being planned, and they're spending the $10 million because they believe that this area will be this huge vanadium hub, as they call it, and it's also part of the North Queensland economic zone. So there's a whole bunch of other incentives that come into this, including the fact that in the next drill program, past the diamond drilling, I'm most likely to get some funding for that from the government because we'll be drilling in new areas. So every time you drill in a new area, there's an opportunity to get funding. So it won't even come out of our treasury. So that's actually pretty positive as well. And as it says there, Queensland wants to be a global leader when it comes to everything to do with the renewable energy revolution, just like everybody else. But they put their money where their mouth is so far. So we're pretty happy about that. Okay, so that's actually the town of Townsville on the coast. Nice little spot if you ever get the chance. North Queensland's a great place, and the Great Barrier Reef's just off the coast there. You're welcome. And here are the near-term catalysts for us. So I'm starting some met work. We've already got some samples from the earlier drilling. Those are in the process of getting collated into a met sample. We'll do some initial drilling at Flinders and Runnymede to just tidy those up a bit so we can produce some more tonnes. But in reality, this is more about a materials handling exercise. It's about getting a metallurgical test flow sheet together and getting some trial mining done as soon as we possibly can. So all of those things are most important. This developing the process pathway is key. I know most of the other players in the region, there are obviously other companies, they're all doing this. We're a little bit behind them. My plan is to catch up. We're going to do a few things a little bit differently. We're going to do some geophysical work on the downhole geophysics as well, because being a sediment, I want to know where I am. So when I drill a hole, I want to know where we are. So that way we'll be able to model on the same basis where we are previously. That's important. The mineralogy is also important because obviously when you've got something like this where the grade sits around sort of 0.35%, what you want to be able to do is find patches within your ore body where you can actually fast track those above others. And that's what we'll be doing with that information. We'll update the Cambridge resource, as I said, with infill drilling. That will be the diamond core. And then we're looking to start, I shouldn't have complete, we're looking to start a preliminary economic assessment by the end of next year. That'll mean we'll have done all that work. We'll have also commenced doing the initial environmental work. There's a MET station in Richmond, 30 kilometres away, so I can use all that climatic data. Because it's pastoral lease, most of it has had many forms of flora and fauna studies already, so we'll be able to get access to those. And so it's not likely to be a big cost to us. But I will also add that our First Nations traditional owners, they have no claims for this country at the moment, and it's likely, as always happens, there's an opportunity for them to make a claim. They just haven't made one in the past, probably because they've been running around making claims everywhere else. So it's probably going to happen, and that's fine. I've got very good experience, great relationships with the traditional owners. They just want to be part of the exercise, and we'd be happy to make them part of it, that's for sure. Capital structure, with our raising recently, we've now got 174 million shares on issue, fully diluted, we're 245. A whole bunch of warrants in there which have done that. They're all 10-cent warrants, and if we can get our share price up to about 15 to 20 cents, we'll be able to call on those, and then that'll put some more cash in the treasury. So that's a pretty good outcome for us as well, particularly as we think that once we start get going over the next few months, that the news flow will encourage people to charge in and buy the vanadium story. So to sum up, expansive sedimentary oxide. So basically, that's the big difference between us and the guys in the other metal part where they've got to liberate their titanium and vanadium from iron. Ours is just sitting in the sediment. We'll crush it, we'll run it through jigs, we'll run it through a wash plant, and we'll pull a lot of that stuff out without too much trouble. We've got quite a large resource. It's not the biggest one in the region by far, but it's as good as they have in terms of grade, in terms of what they have in size. And the project next door has modelled their first 20 years on an 80 million tonne deposit. Well, we're way past that. So I don't see that there's any real issue in starting sooner than trying to build up 1 billion tonnes before you start. Now is the time. There's demand. There's substantial historic information, and basically we're going through that right now to pull all that together so that when we do step through everything, we're actually going to extract every little ounce out of that work that we do so that we're having our best opportunity to catch up and go past our competitors. And vanadium, well, vanadium is really a special metal which has been given the wrong sort of tag. Who knows why, but it's the forgotten one, and I think it's the one that should be in everybody's mind when you start thinking about the fact that the transformation of our energy requires so many different levers on it. This is one that hasn't really been pushed, and I thank you.